So the debate that never goes away is back. Brianna Joy Gray and Virgil Texas had Noam Chomsky on their new podcast, which is called Bad Faith. I highly suggest you guys check it out if you haven't yet. It's a really good podcast. The lesser evilism debate is back. They had a long conversation with Chomsky about this. Chomsky is on the record as being, hardcore on the side of, suck it up on election day and always vote for the lesser evil, because those tiny little differences actually, in the long run, make a huge difference when it comes to policy and when it comes to vulnerable populations. And he thinks it's silly to not vote for the lesser evil. Virgil Texas and Brianna Joy Gray, at the very least, were playing devil's advocate, where, they were making the whole system is screwed up beyond belief and you shouldn't legitimize it argument. And so they're making the argument that we should demand more, we should demand better from our politicians. And it blew up on Twitter. They released some promo clips of it, and it was pretty contentious. I won't go as far as to say that they seem like they didn't like each other, but Chomsky seemed a little bit annoyed with the entire conversation, and Virgil and Brianna were insistent, and I think they really are looking for good responses to the concerns that they have. And I can safely say I don't think they got those answers from Chomsky. He does come across, agree or disagree with him, he does come across as kind of like dismissive and glib on this whole topic. Like, if you don't already agree with him, then like you're an idiot and you need to catch up. That's the sense I get, at least, from watching it. So I tweeted some stuff about it, and there was mixed reactions. One of the things I said is Chomsky is one of my biggest intellectual inspirations, but I'm happy that Brianna Joy Gray challenged him. He's a genius, but he's not a deity, and he's a big boy and he can handle dissent. That was one of the things I said. Then I got reading through the reactions, not just to my tweet, but all over Twitter about this. I kind of went off a little bit, did a little tweet storm. I said, stop bitching at the lesser evil voting debate challenge. And the reason I say that is because it's weird. I feel like this is a really interesting and important debate that needs to be had, but people, for whatever reason, get really dismissive and shitty when this debate comes up. Like, they want to just shut it all down immediately. And I don't know, that strikes me as weird. Like, if this is an interesting and important debate, and it is, then shouldn't we all want to have the conversation more? Like, I get it. A lot of people have very definitive answers on this, and I think that that's what that stems from. People want everybody to catch up to where they're at already, and if you're not where they're at already, then people get really dismissive and really shitty to each other. But, when I read these things on Twitter, I just think they're not listening to each other. People are very obtuse on this topic, and it does get kind of annoying. Matt Iglesias tweeted, this is in a direct response to one of the tweets from Virgil or Brie, and he said, is Bernie Dead Enders doing an anti-electoralism takes really going to be a viable podcast genre? I'm skeptical. Now, it's funny he says that, because they're making $25,000 a month on Patreon, and Brianna Joy Gray and Virgil Texas were already very well known anyway, so it's weird to be like, oh, is this going to be viable? I don't know. They've already been viable even before this podcast, so it's just a weird thing to say. And they're also not Bernie Dead Enders. That's just a random pot shot for no reason. And they're not anti-electoralism either. Just because they're not sold yet on Joe Biden, or they haven't heard good arguments for Joe Biden, doesn't mean that they're against electoralism. It just means that they're not sure yet if they're sold on Joe Biden. Now, you could agree or disagree with that, but that doesn't mean they're anti-electoralism, so it's a really weird thing to say. And, the fact of the matter is, tepid criticism of Joe Biden really gets the blue check journalists to be so incredibly douchey. And that gets under my skin, because, again, you can respond to the specific criticisms that are being made by Virgil and Brie, but people never do that. They just like want to insult and shame. To respond to the direct criticisms that they're making actually takes a little bit of effort, and it would be a human thing to do and a sympathetic thing to do, and you get the sense that people are just not in a human or sympathetic mood. Tim Wise is another guy who calls himself an anti-racist activist, and he says, Virgil and the entire Chapo crew, whence he comes, are such adolescent amateurs at this, just children thinking they make up in angst what they lack in perspective and historical wisdom. It's embarrassing. It's just, but we need revolution. Shut up or start it. Get off the mic. Like, again, this is, I don't get this, because they're doing this stream of insults, and these people say their goal is to get more people to vote for Joe Biden, but a stream of insults is not going to make young, passionate lefties who might be fans of Chapo Trap House, want to vote for Biden. If people are on the fence for voting for a mass incarcerating Iraq war supporter, you browbeating them is not going to help. So it's just, it's so socially obtuse. And one of the things that, really kept popping in my mind as I'm reading the discourse on this topic is that, listen, I get why people would vote for Biden, and I can give a summation of that position in a way that I think his supporters would say is totally fair. But what's annoying is that I know a lot of Biden supporters can sum up well why a lefty might not vote for him, but they pretend like there's absolutely no case there and you're being ridiculous if you're not going to cast that vote. And honestly, I just think that's dishonest. Because if you acknowledge the arguments from a left-wing perspective against a Biden vote, well, then that means you would have to address the concerns, and I don't think these people can do that. So they'd rather just shame and name call and make people feel like shit. And this whole conversation really reminds me a lot of, the fact that one of my proudest achievements that I'm really happy to always bring up is that our show has actually deconverted a lot of people from that ugly right-wing pipeline. And, given that I've deconverted a lot of people, I can say with absolute certainty that there are no shortcuts in changing minds. And if you really want to change somebody's mind, it's really a long and arduous process, and it requires thoughtfulness, it requires nuance, it requires effort, because people are complex. And so you can't just shame people out of the positions that they have, because the reason why they have the positions they have is because of all of their life experience, and everything in their life has led them to where they are right now. So for you to think, I'll just treat somebody like shit and then maybe they'll agree with me, it's honestly just socially obtuse in a way that's mind-boggling. It is clearly counterproductive to the goal of getting more Biden voters. And these people just don't seem to care, which leads me to believe that what they're doing is more in-group democratic virtue signaling than really trying to change minds. And especially when it comes to identity, it's hard to change somebody's mind, because if they perceive that you're attacking their being, their entire character, their essence, then they're just going to retreat further into the comfort of what they already know, and they're going to shut off to new ideas. And what I want these, honestly, democratic hacks to understand is that I do think most people can have their minds changed, but the last thing you should do is insult them and shame them and be dismissive of their concerns. So the problem is, guys, that, and I tweeted this, I'm not doing this as some sort of concern troll. I've seen some convincing and thoughtful pro-Biden arguments, and I can tell you for sure that I actually respect it. And it's the shitty ones that get under my skin and make me lose it. And unfortunately, 85% of the commentary on this from the, pro-Biden crowd is just shitty. It's just shitty. It's not convincing. It's not well thought out. It's annoying. And so just up your game a little bit. Again, the strongest arguments I think for Biden, probably yes, Paris Climate Agreement is one of them, because he'll get us back in that, and Trump won't, and that's important. Paris Climate Agreement isn't nearly enough, but it's something. The Iran deal, Trump and his administration are pushing towards war with Iran, increasing sanctions. Biden was part of the administration that did the Iran deal. So he'll very likely either get back in it or at least ease tensions and ease some of those new sanctions. So that's just 2 examples right there. Again, I can go on. There are areas where Biden's better. But again, these points are actually thoughtful and policy-based. And what's annoying is none of the Biden people do that. It's all just like, let me call you a piece of shit because you don't already agree with me. And it really is annoying. Now, the final argument I want to make real quick is there's no substitute for winning. So this is my message to the left. We're having this debate right now, and it's contentious, and a lot of people are like, okay, I'm going to suck it up and do the lesser evil vote, and, you know, that's one camp. The other camp is like, I can't do it. I just can't bring myself to do it. I'm on the left. Biden's not going to represent me in any way that I think is sufficient. I just can't do it. And we're going to have this infight, and it's going to drag on. And we can get into the specifics of what kind of tactics are more likely to work and what isn't going to work and all that. But really, there's no substitute for winning. So instead of having these fights in our own circle, what we need to do is get our mind right to actually win a presidential primary and win the White House. And I do think what we need is a candidate who really puts front and center the issues that we know we have a giant advantage on. So like all of the economic stuff, Medicare for all, free college, living wage, ending the wars and taking that money and putting it into an infrastructure deal. Now UBI polls well over 50%. If we have a Democratic candidate who leans into these things, okay, drops all of the stuff where we're not popular, because breaking news, the way you win an election is to lean into the stuff where you're popular and don't really talk all that much about the stuff where you're not necessarily popular. So yes, put some of the social issues things aside. That doesn't mean we give in on the policy. When we're in power, we do the right thing on those policies as well, but you lean into the economic stuff, you lean into the populist stuff. And I really do believe if we do that and we learn from Bernie's mistakes, then we can win in the long run. And, you know, the problem is I think Bernie didn't have that killer instinct, didn't know how to adjust when it looked like Biden had taken the lead. And listen, fundamentally, I do think he was weak. And I do think that they overcorrected from some of the narratives of 2016 about, oh, you're too white and male of a campaign. And they leaned maybe a little too much into the woke stuff. And they lost a lot of those working class voters in the Rust Belt that formerly went to Bernie over Hillary and now went to Biden. So what we need to do is get serious about winning and strategizing. And unfortunately, a lot of what I see on the left, people don't even agree on that strategy. Even though we kind of know the roadmap as to how a lefty can win, they don't even necessarily agree on that strategy. But if you really care about getting change for the better, we have to at least agree on that. And there really is no substitute for winning, or else we're going to be having these arguments as the losing side internally forever. And I don't want that. Now, I know I said final point before. I think I'm going to say it again now. The thing nobody's going to tell you is that as of right now, where we are right now, there really are no good answers. There aren't. There just are no good answers. So if you go along to get along and vote for Biden and just, you know, do the lesser evil thing, I think you're insane if you think, oh, then we'll push him left after we elect him. He ain't going left. He's a neoliberal corporatist. He is who he is. Is he a little better than Trump overall? Sure. But that's where it ends. Like, it doesn't get any better than that. You're not going to push him left. He's not going to be like FDR. I honestly think you're delusional if you believe that. We have his long track record. He ain't changing, okay? So in that sense, the left would lose, right? But I also think it is true that the left could still lose even if we did the perfect strategy. So, you know, I've called for Bernie, when he dropped out, hey, here, Joe, here's a list of executive orders. If you sign on to these, I'll do everything I can to get you elected, but you have to say, I'm going to do these within the first 100 days. And then Joe either will say yes, or he'll cut a deal and say, hey, Bernie, I can't do these 10 executive orders, but I can do these 5. Or he'd say, I can't do these 10, but I'll do these 3. But whatever it is, it would have given Bernie something to take to the base and say, see, now we know he's going to do these things. Now we know he's going to do these things, so you got to vote for him. Now, I think that's the best possible strategy to try to get him to do the right thing. And I do think if we organize and we strategize and we throw our weight around and say, listen, here are our terms, accept them or not, That's our best chance. But even if we do that, there's still a chance he'll say like, yeah, sure, I'll do all those things. And then he still doesn't do them when he's elected. Or there's a chance he says, fuck off, we don't want you, we want the suburbanites more. So my point is, when you lose, there is no clear-cut right answer because we lost. So the real answer is, as I said, there is no substitute for winning. So we have to get serious about strategizing and winning. And unfortunately, I don't see us doing much of that either, but that is the path. The path is, if we win, then we get to dictate the terms, and we get to be in the driver's seat, and it's the losers who are going to be scrambling and infighting and all that stuff. But right now, we lost, we're scrambling, we're infighting, there's big disagreements on how to move forward. What I will say is, ultimately, anybody who's really convinced, like, oh, if we just do X now, that's it, we got it, they're deluding themselves, honestly. Even like the third-party people. Because third parties, there is an institutional bias against third parties. It is literally rigged against third parties. You think you're going to start a new third party? You don't even have ballot access. You don't even have ballot access. First, you have to unrig the system and do something like get ballot access, and then you could try to build from the ground up. But I got news for you. We have Democrat and Republican. That's like Pepsi and Coca-Cola. If RC Cola comes out of nowhere, you really think you're going to get over 50% in this country? Absurd. It's not going to happen. So everybody's deluding themselves to one extent or another. The people who want to take over the Democratic Party, the people who are third-party people, the people who want to go along to get along and then push Biden left after they vote for him, everybody's deluding themselves to some extent. So the bottom line is, we can stop deluding ourselves, and we can try to actually win and be serious about it. But again, who knows if they'll actually do that? I'm just a man over here screaming out in the wilderness. But I don't see this lesser evilism debate going away, and I don't see it becoming more thoughtful, I guess. There will just be people who largely agree with each other on policy goals at each other's throats over strategy and how to move forward, but there's no substitute for winning. We got to win. We got to get serious about it, or else we'll have this same feeling until the end of time where we're totally disorganized, we're at each other's throats, and nothing good comes.